If I speak in the tongues of angels and of men, and I don't have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have faith that can move mountains, but do not have love, I'm nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor, and I give my body to the flames so that I can boast, and I don't have love, it doesn't gain me anything. Love is patient. Love is kind. Does not envy. It does not boast. It's not proud. It is not rude. It is not self-seeking. It's not easily angered. Keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. Where there are prophecies, they will cease. And where there are tongues, they will stop. And where there is knowledge, it will be rendered ineffective. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when the perfect comes, then the part disappears. When I was a child, I spoke as a child, I thought as a child, I reasoned as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. Now we see poorly, like in a mirror. But then we will see face to face. Now I know in part, and then I shall know fully the way that I'm fully known. 3 remain: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love. You know, you've heard sections of that before, and very often, in fact, most of the time that you have heard part of those sections of verses, they have always been in a wedding. But those are not wedding verses necessarily. They're not even in a section of Scripture that talks about weddings and marriage and husbands and wives and all of the stuff that we normally apply them to. They're in a section of Scripture that applies to how the church is supposed to deal with one another. When we have different gifts and different abilities, it's about how we serve God. It's verses about what motivates us to serve God and where our motivation comes from. There was this young cowboy, and he was riding, across the plain one day, and he's kind of bored, and he saw this old man coming on this mule. And he thought, you know what, I think I'll have a little fun with that old man on the mule. So he comes up to that old man, and he says, "Hey, old man, you know how to dance?" Old man kind of shakes his head. Young cowboy pulls out a 6-gun. He says, "Get off that mule. I want to make you dance." So the old man gets off the mule. The cowboy starts shooting in the ground. He starts dancing. You've seen it on TV, right? He runs out of bullets. Old man, he just kind of wipes his brow. He reaches on the other side of the mule, and he pulls out a shotgun. He points it at the cowboy, and he said, "Hey, cowboy, you ever kissed a mule?" And the young cowboy said, "No, but I've always wanted to." And then that's kind of motivation, isn't it? And the question is, what is it that motivates you to do something? What motivates you to action? So Jesus shows up, and Jesus has got this great new teaching style. And I mean, he is absolutely amazing in the way that he teaches. And he comes along, and they're looking for a way to trick Jesus. They're looking for something they can use against him. So they come up with this great question, and they say, what's the greatest commandment? Now, if you were to hear that question, somebody came up to you and said, "What is the greatest?" Now, don't cheat, because you already know the answer, right? But you come up and you ask that question, you would think, man, if you were Jewish and have you ever sat down to read Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy? How many of you get up in the morning and say, I just cannot wait to read Leviticus today? And you jump right in. I mean, it's law after law after law after law. Eat this, don't eat this, act this way, don't do this. If you get a sore on you, then you treat it this way. You know, you got a rash, you're supposed to do this. If you commit this kind of sin, you go offer this kind of sacrifice. And if you do this, go offer this sacrifice, but don't offer this, and make sure it's only this old and doesn't have any spots on it. There's a ton of laws in there. And you look at that and say, okay, which one is the very greatest? Which one is the most important? How about if you went to the House of Representatives or the Senate and you go there Monday morning, you get on the Senate floor or the House of Representatives floor and say, what I want to know today is, of all of the laws that we have in America, which one is the biggest? Which one is the most important? I am sure you could get quite a bit of debate about that. And Jesus says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, and your strength, and your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment, and the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commands. All of them? I mean, even that one about don't eat a kid born in his mother's milk, you know, those weird kind of commands, they really hang on that? Yeah, they hang on that. Where's your love? What is it that you desire? What is it that holds your attention? Now, I know when we talk about this in our language, you usually say, yeah, but you know that love word, we kind of overuse that. You know, you don't really love baseball, you kind of like baseball. No, I know kids who just love, they love baseball. They love it as much as anything in the world. And they don't go to practice because they have to go to practice. They go to practice because they get to go to practice. They're excited about going to practice. Any of y'all remember that? I mean, when I was a kid, we didn't play. I was talking to Rio about this the other day. We didn't play, we got spring ball, right? And then regular ball in the summer. Then we got fall ball, right? So Rio, you probably play like year round, don't you? It's okay, you tell me, sorry, right? When I was a kid, we had Little League, and if I remember right, Little League was at the most about 7 or 8 games in the middle of the summer when you weren't doing anything else, and then it was done, right? So when we played baseball, it's like, man, I can't wait to go play baseball. Right, I'm excited about going to baseball practice because I love it. I wanted to do it. If you talk about people who have a really great hobby, I mean, they're just really passionate about a hobby. Can they love it? Yeah, they can love it, can't they? Anybody like to love to fish? I mean, maybe you don't get to fish all that you want, but you love to fish. I mean, if you had a choice that tomorrow, instead of going to work, you'd go fishing. Anybody love to shop? I mean, love to shop. You can be a guy and love to shop too. I mean, if you had a choice between going to work tomorrow and somebody, if you had a choice between going to work tomorrow, somebody giving you $20,000 and say, go shop, you'd tell the go shop route, right? If they give me 20, I might go shop. You know, I'm not sure, and I don't even like to shop. But you can have things in life that you love. I mean, you're just passionate about them. You can have possessions that you love. That they are so important to you that you wouldn't get rid of them for anything. The boys have a couple of things that are at my house that they'll get when I'm dead. Don't kill me to get it, but after I'm dead, they'll get it. There are a couple of pocket watches in there. One belonged to my grandfather on my dad's side. One belonged to my grandfather on my mom's side. You know what? They're pretty special. Pretty special watches. You couldn't put a price tag on them. You couldn't come say, hey, how much is this watch worth? I've got a duck call. And this duck call, I did not know it, but this duck call is evidently pretty important. Now, I don't know anything about duck calls, but there is a guy who really does know about duck calls. And Diane was telling him about it, and he said, could I see it? And I took it, and Diane took it to work and showed it to him, and he said, man, that is a really important duck call. So-and-so made this, and he's really famous, but he made it before he really started making them, and it doesn't have, it's got his mark. You can tell it's him, but it's before he really started marking them. That thing's worth a lot of money. You think I could buy it? And I was like, no, you can't buy it. It was my grandfather's duck call, and honestly, he probably traded a dog or a shovel or something for it, and he probably didn't pay more than $5 for it at the very most. And he said, well, it needs to be in a museum. I said, well, when I die, if somebody wants to put it in a museum, that's fine. But right now, it's going to stay right where it is because that was my grandfather's duck call. Did it have a price tag? See, what happens is love helps us decide what is really important to us. It determines our important things. And you look, you think, what does it really? Yeah, it really does. The things that you love are the things that are most important to you. And now, you might be thinking in your head, well, if I start thinking about that, I don't really think the things that are most important to me really need to be the most important things to me. Well, I don't know what they are for you. I can't explain them to you. I'm just telling you what they are. But they determine your most important things. So Jesus comes along and he really simple statements. These aren't hard to understand. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And it's true. It's true. You can look at your time. You can look at your checkbook. You can look at a lot of other indicators that you have in life. And generally, we will try to spend most of our time with the things that are the most important to us. And even things that we want to spend more time with, we feel bad because we don't spend more time with them because they are the most important to us. Because that's where our treasure is. That's where our heart is. So then Jesus comes along and he gives really, really tough stuff. You can't serve two masters. Either you hate the one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. And you wipe your brow and say, I'm glad it was just about money. But it's really not just about money, is it? It's about the thing that's most important to you. Because you can't serve two things. You can't have divided loyalty. James calls it, talking about Christians and the way they live the life, it's like a reed that's blown back and forth and swayed by the wind. It just goes whichever direction it wants to go because it doesn't have any foundation. It doesn't really know what it wants. And we go through our life and we look at the things, and the things that are most important to us are the things that we spend our time and our effort on. And then Jesus comes out with these really, really difficult statements. If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, his wife and his children, his brothers and his sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. And how many of you read that and kind of scratch your head thinking, what in the world is Jesus talking about? Jesus surely doesn't tell me to hate my wife because he tells me to love my wife. He doesn't tell me to hate my father, he tells me to respect my father. What does it mean to hate my father and mother and my wife and my children and my brothers and my sisters, even my own life? So we look at that and we say, well, there's a way that the word was used and it means to love less. And yeah, that's kind of true. Rachel was loved and Leah was hated, in the Old Testament. And it doesn't mean that he hated Leah, but he didn't love her as much as he loved Rachel. But really it has to do with priority and what becomes most important to you. What are you devoted to? If you want to become a citizen of the United States, you renounce allegiance to a native land. You take an oath to have an allegiance to this land. And Jesus comes along, and what Jesus needs is commitment and desire, and what he needs is love. So you look at something just as simple as being at church. And you ask, why are you here? Why are you here? Well, there are some, and I don't think I'm stepping out of bounds here. There may be some who are here because mom and dad said you were going to be here. I can promise you there was a time in my life when the reason I was at church is because my dad and my mom, I'm not going to pin it on either one of them individually, but they looked at me and they said, boy, we're going to church. And when he said, boy, we're going to church, guess what we did? We went to church. Now, do I look back on and think, boy, he was just a mean dad? No, he was a very loving dad. He was a very loving dad. Some of you are here because maybe somebody else told you were going to be here that wasn't a mom or a dad. They said, hey, we're going to church this morning. There are some of you who are here because you just figure it's a place to be, and we're glad you're here. We don't want you not to be here, but you just kind of like, well, I guess it's Sunday. I'm supposed to go to church. I think I'll just go to church. And I ask, do you love going to church? Do you love it? Is it a priority to it? Is it something that's important? And it's not about doing something. Okay, it's not about like filling a requirement, or it's not about getting my A, B's, and C's done right, or making sure I've got everything written down on the page right. It's about relationship. If you take church or worship or God, if you take that outside of relationship, then it does not going to mean anything. Anybody remember, okay, some of y'all have to go way back in your brains, okay? And some of you won't have to go back so far, but some of you have to go way back in your brains. Do you remember on Friday night when you had a date? Anybody can remember that far back? I'm talking to old people here, not young people, all right? Anybody remember getting that little tingly feeling down in your stomach? Like, ooh, baby, I got a date tonight. Y'all don't remember that, do you, huh? Y'all probably don't get that on Friday night when y'all sit down and eat pizza and watch some rerun on TV, do you? Did anybody have to remind you that you had a date? Nobody ever had to remind me if I had a date. Oh, no, I've got a date. When did you get that little feeling? Oh, it was physiological. It's peptides. Oh, give me all those. But the thing is, it's connected to what you really desire. And see, the measure of our love for God is obedient. You run into people all the time and say, well, I love Jesus. I don't doubt them. It's not me to judge them. Don't want that to come across in any way like that, any way, shape, or form. And they say, well, I love Jesus. Or I will say, oh yeah, I love Jesus. Do I really? How do you judge it? How do you look at your life and say, yeah, I love Jesus? And you see something like this and you say, Greg, is it really like that? Yeah, it really is. Whoever has my commands and obeys them, he is the one who loves me. He who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I will love him and show myself to him. Whoever has my commands and obeys them, he is the one who loves me. This is love for God, to obey his commands. Now again, it's not obeying commands for the sake of obeying commands. It's not this like you're filling out a sheet and you will say, okay, I didn't lie, didn't cheat, didn't steal, didn't go to church on Sunday, sang 2 songs, 3 songs in a prayer. It's not that. It's this where your heart is. It's where your desire is. I don't follow God's commands just simply because I want to follow a command, but I'm trying to build relationship. I'm trying to be molded into his image. I'm trying to be molded into what he wants me to be, because here's the thing that happens. The action can be right and the motivation be completely wrong. There are times in the Old Testament they were bringing exactly the right sacrifice. I mean, they had their laws and they were bringing, the right goat, the right lamb at the right time. They were killing it the right way. They were sacrificing it the right way. They were burning the right part, keeping the right part. The priest was getting the right part. Everything was done according to the law, and everything was done correctly. And God comes along, and you know what he says? I just hate those sacrifices. I hate them. You think, well, God, we did it right. Yeah, but I hate them. Because you know what you're doing? You're just following a law. You're not really trying to love me. You're offering this sacrifice in the right way. Then you're going out here and you're mistreating your brother, your sister. You're withholding wages. You're taking advantage of people. That's not what my people are like. So Jesus comes along, and Jesus is teaching, and something very similar. He said, when you do your acts of righteousness, when you do your good stuff, don't do it so everybody else can see it. Because if you do it so that everybody else can see it, you know what your reward is? Everybody else gets to see it. But do it so that your Father in secret sees it. And you do it not based on how you look to other people or how you don't look to other people. You do it based on the love that you have for God. So you can do the right thing, but the motivation be completely wrong, and God's just looking at you, shaking his head at you. So why do you do the things you do? Why do you come to church or read your Bible, or why do you pray? Why do you spend time with God? Is it just because it's something to do? See, here's what I found, at least for me. It's very easily to get my motivation off kilter. Very easy for me to just do things for the sake of doing things. Very easy for me to just say, well, I'm supposed to do this, 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 and this, and I just kind of go through my routine, and I go through my little thing, and everything is fine as long as I can stay in my little routine. But sometimes when you stop and you ask yourself, why do I do the things that I do? So what's love got to do with it? And please don't just pull the lyrics from that song. It's not even a really good lyric-y song, right? It doesn't have anything to do with what I'm talking about, so don't go back and say, well, Greg said we're going to sing this song by Tina Turner. What's love got? No, it doesn't have anything to do with what I'm doing, right? It's just a title, right? No Tina Turner song going on here. But what does it have to do with it? Everything. Everything. The way you serve God. The lengths that you will go to serve God. What you're willing to do. What you're willing not to do. How you treat your spouse, which is what we'll talk about next week. How you treat your kids, which we'll talk about the week after that. How you treat one another, which is what we'll talk about the week after that. Just sermon preview, right? But that's what love has to do with it. You know, I sat down when I thought, what's the greatest motivator? Is it love or fear? Struggle with that sometimes. So love or fear? Sometimes we don't do things, or we don't do them because we're afraid maybe somebody will find out, or we'll get caught, or if you're in sales, fear is a great sales technique. But do you do some things out of fear? Honestly, I'd say I do. When you ask me why I first became a Christian, you think I first became a Christian out of love or fear? Mine was fear. Yours may be love, and I applaud you for that. Mine was like, I don't know about all this other stuff, but I am pretty sure I don't want to go to hell. So we need to take care of that. You know, the interesting thing is now it's not fear at all. It's love. Maybe it's becoming more perfect. Maybe it's becoming more complete. Maybe it's becoming more mature. Maybe it's exactly what Paul was talking about in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. But I'm just asking you this morning, do you love God? Do you love God? And is your life centered on loving Him? When you list your priorities, I know this is church, so in church you say, yeah, it's a tough list, But if you get away from church and you start looking at your priorities, where is God? Do you serve Him out of joy because of who He is? Are you trying to build a relationship? Are you looking for a relationship with Him? Is it something more than just kind of keeping rules and obligations? But do you really desire to serve God? And I just want you to think about that this morning as we stand and sing. And if you need prayers of the church, I ask you to come forward.